Now, this may come as a surprise to a lot of you, but AT&T and Verizon stock have seen better days. Now, in this video, I'm going to focus primarily on AT&T stock, but we're going to cover Verizon as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about everything that's going on with AT&T right now. We're going to cover Friday shenanigans. I know you can see this 4.1% drop. And then we're going to talk about what I'm doing with the stocks. So we'll start with AT&T and we'll go to the lifetime of the stock. You can see it's been around 93, 94 being the last time that AT&T was around this price. So yeah, the news articles, they're not exaggerating. I mean, AT&T has hit its 29-year low, and if it keeps going the way it's going to hit its 30-year low. That is absolutely terrible for AT&T. Now, Verizon was a bit better, but not by much. We're talking 2011, 2010, the last time Verizon was this bad. Yeah, not a good look for either of these stocks at all. Now, just to be perfectly transparent, I own both AT&T and Verizon stock. Check out any of my portfolio videos. I've owned them for a few years. Now, the reason I bought both stocks was to hedge one against the other. If AT&T did better than Verizon for a long period of time, I could fold Verizon to AT&T and vice versa. At the time when I bought them, I didn't think that both stocks would be performing this bad. So let's focus on some recent events and then some really recent events, and then I'll talk about how I feel and what I'm doing with the stocks. Now let's look at a 6-month chart for AT&T. Now I want to go back, not the last earnings, but the earnings before. The earnings before were really good for AT&T. Now they missed a bit on revenue, but no one really cares about the revenue that much as far as, whether they should invest or not invest in AT&T. They mainly care about the EPS and the free cash flow. AT&T absolutely knocked it out of the park with the EPS, and I'm not showing it here, but they did really well with the free cash flow. And as a result, the stock shot right on up. Verizon, where is the Verizon earnings? Verizon, they've been struggling a little bit compared to AT&T. They've had a bit rougher time, but their last earnings were pretty good. They had some initial success, and then something very interesting happened right after that. This was right after earnings. So on the back of good news, no matter what happened, even as the stock market began to recover, just AT&T and Verizon, they just got absolutely wronged. Absolutely wrecked over those past pretty decent earnings. Now, I don't know why the stocks did what they did. You can blame it on a number of macroeconomic conditions. It could be inflation. It could be the effect of all of the Fed rate hikes. Or it could be the market as a whole rotating out of the sector. Or it could be T-Mobile. They weren't affected nearly as badly as Verizon or AT&T. And if we look at the Dow, around that time period, the Dow was actually on its way up. So who knows why AT&T and Verizon got hit so hard, despite good earnings. Now, fast forward to AT&T's last earnings. They were awful. And the worst part, I guess the most disappointing part, was that most of the earnings were pretty good. Considering AT&T. Now, they did miss revenue a little bit, but they beat EPS, which for a company like AT&T and Verizon, EPS is very important. However, their free cash flow was another story. AT&T's free cash flow came in at $1 billion compared to $2.61 billion estimated. That is absolutely terrible for a company like AT&T, whose lifeblood as far as investor interest is free cash flow, because free cash flow affects their AT&T's ability to pay dividends. Say what you will about the earnings reaction, about them being oversold or not, but you can't come in at roughly a third of the free cash flow estimated and have your stock do well. Maybe this was oversold, but AT&T is not exactly blameless. Now, in AT&T's defense, they did say right after they brought out their earnings that they're still on track to meeting their cash flow targets for the year. Now, we'll see in next earnings whether that's true or not, but as far as we know right now, they said they're good. Now, let's get to Friday and all the interesting things that happened then. As you can see, AT&T dropped 4.1%, which If you've been following AT&T, you will know that that's a huge move for the company. AT&T usually trades, I mean, at worst, 1% down or 1% up by the day. A 2% moves a lot for the company. So to see this stock drop 4.1% is terrible. And it was worse before the day ended. Now, why did this happen? Now, depending on what news you read, you might have read that it was because of the Wall Street Journal article about the lead cables. Wall Street Journal alleges behind this paywalled article that AT&T and Verizon knew about old toxic lead cables that might be poisoning workers. US Telecom, which is the agency that is behind the cables, they posted a rebuttal saying that there is no evidence and US regulators didn't find any evidence that these cables are cause of lead exposure or are causing a public health issue. Now, I have no idea who's right, whether WSJ or US Telecom is right, and I have no way of finding out. Only time will tell. The reason why investors might be dismayed by this is because if this goes against AT&T and Verizon, they may have to pay to clean this stuff up. Pay billions of dollars, which to AT&T and Verizon, to which EPS matters and free cash flow matters, that could be a problem. But I don't think that's a reason the stock AT&T dropped this much, because the news came out yesterday. Verizon stock only dropped 1.8%. AT&T stock dropped 4.1%. No, I have a bigger reason why AT&T dropped. This is almost certainly due to JP Morgan downgrading AT&T to neutral and lowering the price target from $22 to $17. That's more likely the cause of the drop-off. Now, let's talk about how I feel about the whole situation and what I'm doing with the stocks. So let's touch on the telecom cable thing and then the JP Morgan downgrade. For the long term, I don't care about any of those. Those are short-term price movements. And as far as analysts upgrades, downgrades, I don't care about any of that. I didn't care when analysts started rating Gevo a buy, and I don't care about JP Morgan downgrading AT&T to neutral. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me more is AT&T's long-term performance. And I will say that it's very true that AT&T absolutely screwed up last quarter with the free cash flow. That is absolutely true. And hopefully AT&T recovers for that. Until last quarter, AT&T had been doing pretty well. And aside from the cash flow last quarter, AT&T continues to do well. It's been transforming itself into a leaner, meaner company. If you look at the income statements over the past quarters, you can see evidence of that. AT&T has been earning less revenue since divesting from Warner Brothers, but you can see that even with the lower revenue, it's been, with a few exceptions, it's been raising its net income and or free cash flow, or at least their EBITDA. And so until last quarter, AT&T has been doing pretty well. And so, yeah, the way I look at this is that AT&T has had one bad quarter. Companies do that a lot. As long as this doesn't continue next quarter, as long as AT&T in the earnings in, I think, 11 days, as long as they don't report a continuation of bad free cash flow, I think we're going to be pretty good. Now, there's always a possibility with AT&T that I fucked up. I screwed up by buying the stock, and I screwed up by continuing to hold even now. But that's what I'm going to do. Now, I'm not going to buy any more shares of AT&T, at least not right now, until the next earnings, because I want to see if AT&T and Verizon bounce back with their free cash flow while continuing to bring down debt and other numbers. If that happens, if AT&T bounces back, then we're good. I will continue buying shares again. If AT&T reports another quarter of bad cash flow, then yeah, there's a possibility that I screwed up with the company and I may need to rethink my investments. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, take care, have a great day, and eat your vegetables.